Ah, ah. Ahí vamos. Ay, bueno. Ahora estamos esperando a Clarita y a Brannon. Así ya vamos preparando. ¡Hey, Clara! ¿Cómo va? Traje algo de comer y café. Así, todavía Ah, ¿cómo va? Ahí está Clara. Espera que te mando.
Hey,
¿Cómo va? ¿Todo bien?
bien, todo
Ay,
bien, todo bien.
así que sí, me estuve viendo las pelis para repasar un poco. Ahora, justo me había escrito la asistente de verano que le estaba indicando cómo entrar. La verdad que repasando un poco todas las pelis, y esto es algo de la conclusión, me está gustando mucho o sea, lo que es terror nórdico, se está convirtiendo en una cosa de mi preferido. O sea, me gustaba mucho el coreano, tailandés, pero te digo que, porque es una fábula. Si todas las pelis son fábulas. O sea, si te lo pones a pensar, básicamente. Y está bueno,
A
y
mí me
Hatching está bueno.
parece, a mí me encanta y la verdad es que primero me encanta hacer esta seguidilla de vivos. Estoy para hacerla más seguido porque me encantó. Me hubiera gustado participar de todos los vivos y me da lástima no haber podido participar de todos los vivos,
Sí, la de
pero
Anthony. Estuvo muy linda charla con Anthony, un capo. Encima, el viernes, o sea, el día antes nos quedamos como 2 horas hablando de ciencia ficción. Yo le mostraba la revista El Péndulo, porque Anthony es muy fan de la ciencia ficción.
y claro, se ve
Y,
en sus películas está 100% claro que le gusta el sci-fi, me encantan sus películas. La verdad es que el viernes me dio mucha lástima no poder estar, pero bueno, no pude y nada. Ya me quedó con eso pendiente, ¿no? O sea, quiero hacer un vivo de vuelta. Me gustaría hablar de sus pelis porque me parecen que están muy buenas. Creo que el terror de Canadá es muy jodido, porque no tiene mucha repercusión el terror de Canadá. Debe ser difícil hacer cine en Canadá de terror, ¿no? Preguntémosle a
sí,
Colonimar.
sí, lo que me dijo es que allá no financian, ¿cómo se dice?
No
No
financia el
financian.
Estado, no ayuda tampoco.
No,
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 perdón,
o
el
sea,
Estado sí ayuda el Estado de Canadá.
terror, no películas de terror ni género, o sea, artístico. Ahí está Brannon. Hey, Brannon, ¿qué te iba a decir? No financian, es como en Argentina gente que no financian terror y fantástico, solo cine arte. Entonces,
Bueno, a Cronenberg sí le financiaron siempre.
sí, fue en los 80 y hubo otra, me dijo que hubo, o sea, como que el chabón sabía, en los 80 fue independiente. Hey, Brannon,
Hi
good
guys,
to
how
see
Hi,
you.
are you?
Brian. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Very
Good
good,
to
very
see you.
good.
Congratulations for the success of Bill well, you were in San Diego. I met my old buddy from the fans of Star Trek for 20 years ago, and most of the Star Trek generation fans thinks that the closest we have to the Star Trek Next Generation is Jorvik, actually.
Oh,
Uh,
good. Well, that's
Yeah, we
nice
have
to
a big
hear.
fandom here, a big fandom. It's
Oh,
very
good.
big.
Oh, good.
yeah.
Good. 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 Yeah. Well, this season is really, really something spectacular. If you're seeing season three there,
Oh yeah.
so yeah.
You have to come to Argentina and talk about your movies and all the stuff you're doing because you have a lot of people here that are wondering about your work and they
Mm-hmm.
specifically they ask me questions for me to ask you. So
Okay. Well,
I
I'll
have
answer
like
here from California if I can. But I would love nothing more than to come to Argentina. I've
Mm-hmm.
never, I've never been there.
you've never been
Oh
here?
yeah. You have to try. Well, I know you like the meat, so here you can.
Yeah, yeah. There's, like I told you, there's an Argentinian restaurant just 2 blocks from here on Melrose
Mm,
Avenue,
Which
and
yeah.
one?
it's called Lala's.
Lalas.
Lala's Argentinian Grill, and it's uh, It's been there for 30 years, and it's always crowded. Because the food is very good, very down to earth, and very good.
We were discussing with all these guys about the Orville, that it's good that you are there, and it's good that Seth is a true fan of Star Trek because he understood the essence of the Next Generation. It's good stories, good scripts, and then he put his own trademark there. But it's, the essence of a good show is good writing, and that's great because now most of shows are, fireworks, effects, and now I enjoy a good story and to address polemic subjects in each character. That's something Star Trek used to do in the Next Generation, and the Orville does all the time, and that's great. I'm glad. Tell said he has earned his alfajores.
Yeah, it's we have a lot of fireworks too in season 3. There's some of the biggest space battles that I've ever seen on television. But we also, it does start with a good story and then a good script. And we spent a lot of time writing these scripts ahead of time. Some of the scripts that are airing now were written 2.5 years ago, before the pandemic, and could have been written yesterday because some of the topics are so current. We had an episode that had not a storyline, but a really powerful scene dealing with abortion that aired the same week that the Supreme Court in this country overturned the abortion rights law. And that was just purely by accident, because I wrote the script years ago. So we try to write themes that are timeless, and but yeah, hopefully people watch it because we'd love to do another season, And they're all, do you guys get Disney Plus there?
Yeah, Star Plus.
Now we have.
So I have a new show coming out. I don't know if you guys are going to get it though. It's called The End Is Nigh.
The End Is Nigh.
Yeah.
What's it about?
So you can find the trailer for it online. It stars an American and science educator named Bill Nye, who's very popular. And it's every episode deals with the end of the world. And it's a disaster movie every week. And then in the first half hour, and then the second half hour, we show how science can save us. So it's very like the Orville, very optimistic, but lots of cool visual effects and disasters.
But it's a fiction. I mean, because I saw a documentary about 7 ways the world might end. There was a documentary. I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I haven't seen it.
But it's really funny because it's the same guy that wakes up at the same time and the same thing. I mean, every single day is like the end of the world by different stuff. Like, for example, Yellowstone or a comet or, well, lots of stuff. But it's like a docu series because it's really made by scientists about things that might happen, but it's not like a fiction. Like, it doesn't have a story, a development or something like the fiction that we watch.
Well, mine is...
Lo perdimos hablando.
In between. It's it does have it is scripted. It has some narrative aspects to it. And I also have a Yellowstone episode.
Ah, yeah? I love Yellowstone. I'm so obsessed with the story of Yellowstone. ¿Lo perdimos?
No, está cargando.
Hay que decirle que se ponga más cerca de la señal.
Sí.
Sabes que sale todo. Bueno, Yellowstone me salió súper zarpado. A mí me encanta. The End is Night with the third two, yeah. Lo perdimos. Se
ver
fue.
si puedo. A ver si. Ah, a ver.
Me gusta este filtro. Me encanta a mí las maneras en que el mundo puede terminar, es algo que me re gusta, o sea, me parece algo...
Hi.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened there.
Are you close to the modem?
Well, I'm going to start. We're here to talk about Nordic horror, and I was saying, Clara, that is one of right now is one of my favorite horror. I mean, I'm a big fan of Thai horror, Korean, but the recent films that have come out, I know, since Let the Right One In, Border, Shelley from Denmark, from Lamb. I mean, it reminds me a lot to folk stories. I mean, because they are dark fantasy tales with a dark, nuance, and I love because they are so complete. It's this idea, and when I watched them all over again this week, and I felt I was watching, folk stories like
Yeah, they're
the Green.
fantasy tales. I love I love dark fantasy. So when I watch these films that are sort of like the subject that I always consume, either by reading or by watching, I think Nordic horror has a lot of take to the fantasy, and that is something I really enjoy about these films that they are delivering. I mean, it's very, very beautiful to see these dark horror stories. They have no problem with suddenly touching very dark subjects with, for example, a little boy or a little girl as a lead. I mean, maybe the lead character is a little boy or a little girl that maybe we as society are a bit taken aback by this. But the fact that this is represented this way is something that I really enjoy, because it's something that it's a bit taboo to speak about some things. And I think that horror must be taken as a mirror for society. So this is something very, very beautiful that they do, these horror fantasies.
I think a good example of, I like I like the fantastical elements too, but I also like the existential elements. I think, I think of one of the great Nordic horror directors, Ingmar Bergman.
Yeah.
I think most people would say Hour of the Wolf is his horror film, but I think they're all of his films are horror films.
All of his films are horror films.
But in regards to the children, the most recent Nordic horror to come out, one of the more recent ones, is a film called The Innocence.
Yeah.
That deals with the development of morality in children, or the lack of development of morality and empathy in children, and it depicts some acts of horrific cruelty that would and peers into most American horror films.
Are you having good signal, Brannon?
Yeah, I can see you. I can see you guys just fine.
We lose you for a bit. But yeah, what you're saying is something that it's really true. The subject about morality in this sort of films is something that it's really marking a lot of, well, for example, for me, Ingmar Bergman is a character that, I mean, he's a director that has a lot of dialogues about this morality. And lo perdimos, ¿o no?
Sí, creo que sí. Por ahí sí se pone más cerca del modem. Close.
Sí, no, lo perdemos. Perdido para siempre. Pero sí, igual es verdad. A mí, Ingmar Bergman es un tipo que la moralidad, me encanta como la charla desde el lado de... Pero no... here you are.
To the sign modem? Are you close to the modem, to the sign? I don't know.
I don't know. I never have problems with my internet at home, so I don't know what's going on. I'm walking around to see if I can get a better signal. But
I mean, the only real explanation and the logic explanation is that we're being cursed.
Probably. Anyway, I don't know if you can hear me, but I was just saying that the Innocence depicts some acts of cruelty, and but it would never go. Even American horror films wouldn't go anywhere near. It's and there's something about the Nordic landscapes. These kind of where there's nowhere to look but the dark corners. You know, it's really an interesting, harrowing movie. The Innocence. I haven't seen The Hatching. Have you guys seen that one yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
a favorite of Adrian. Not my favorite, but it's one of the favorite of Adrian. And I saw it because of him. But
Innocence. Also, I love Thelma. The scriptwriter is its name is Eric Vogt. He also wrote a horror dark fantasy called Thelma before the Innocence, also fantastic tale. Hatching it's kind of different. It's from Finland, and the pace is fastest than the other films, but also relies on metaphor to talk about certain topics. In this case, it talks about the pressure of a mother, a pressure that suffers a child from her mother. Her mother wants her to become a successful in sport gymnast. And well, she found this egg. She started to raise this egg, and the creatures come out and start eating, like growing. Of course, the movie is about how pressure destroys the kid's psychic, but the way it is presented is really so. As I told you before, as a folk tale, right?
It's really about. Again, I think it's about the relationship between the mother and the daughter, and the pressure of being like the mirror of your daughter. I think that there is some sort of like a moment where the daughter and the mother are like a mirror of each other, and so there's a subject there. In Thelma, the mother and daughter relationship is again presented. I think that Thelma is very similar to Carrie, the Stephen King book, or the movie of Brian De Palma, that I love both of them. But it's like a sort of a Nordic version of Carrie, in my opinion, a very dark, darker even than Carrie, and I think it's very beautiful. But Hatching has this very pointed out the relationship between a mother and a daughter, the mirror that is the daughter and the daughter of the mother, and it's really cool. I think that they are not afraid of being cruel in the films towards children. That is something that in The Innocence you can watch perfectly well, the cruelty, the ethics. But I think all of the films that I've watched recently, Nordic films that I loved, are with children as leading roles. Like, for example, Let the Right One In was my doorway toward the Nordic horror. And it's the story about a little boy and the opening about sexuality and I think the loneliness. I think that there is a lot of loneliness in the films, the leading roles that are portrayed. A lot of loneliness. I think it's present in every single one of the films that I've watched, and it's very. I think it's something cultural about portraying all the characters that I've seen in the films as very lonely, about loneliness.
Alienation.
Alienation, exactly.
Yeah.
It's something that...
Very cold, repressive atmospheres.
Yes. Yes. And
you think of a Nordic film, you think it's very psychological. It deals with alienation, and the best ones take place in the winter.
I think it's always winter there. I mean, I've never
Well,
seen
the
summer
Innocence,
there.
it was interesting. The Innocence takes place during summer. So the whole movie's during the daylight.
It's true. Yeah, it's
That's
true.
true.
Yeah, there are no nighttime scenes in that entire movie because there's no nighttime.
No, there are some night
There
takes.
are?
The one where they travel in the dreams and
In
the
the
most,
dreams, okay.
and also the moments that are violent, when, well, I will spoil something, but the murders are done in usually
During
at
night.
night in the film.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Yeah. But most of it's during the day.
Okay.
It's a daytime.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's just interesting. It's a daytime horror film. Most of the horrors that occur, a lot of the horrors that occur are during the day. And then I think, of course, of another daytime horror film, Midsomar, which is an American director.
I was just about to say that, even though it's considered like sort of like a Nordic film because it's happening in I don't know where
Sweden.
is it?
Sweden.
In Sweden. And it has all these condiments that I think the loneliness is also present, and the daylight as a counterpart of the darkness that is in the story. I think it's beautiful, and that what you're saying about the landscapes that are portrayed in every single film, that they're so big and so immense, and so I think they are so silent. I don't know why. I feel the silence of the place, and that gives me more sense of loneliness.
Yeah,
So it's. Lo perdimos, ¿verdad? Se fue. Lo perdimos para siempre.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unlike American horror films, which are very noisy,
Yes.
Nordic horror is quiet.
That is true, and that is something very awkward to watch because it gives away more of our existential crisis sort of moments that I think are present in those films. Cada vez hablo peor inglés. Yo pensé que hablaba bien inglés, cada vez hablo peor.
No, la verdad que está, creo que...
Pero de
Sí,
práctica.
que es un problema de la señal. Wait.
Pero sí, es verdad,
Yeah.
o sea, creo que The Innocence toca mucho más el tema de la moralidad, pero el resto habla más sobre la soledad y sobre el aislamiento, ¿viste? De los personajes. Es verdad que The Innocence está súper presente el tema de la moralidad y me parece muy zarpado, porque a mí The Innocence me deja muy incómoda, es una incomodidad muy fuerte, ¿viste? Y encima, qué sé yo pensándolo como madre y viendo a mi hija, que yo creo que como sociedad uno intenta darle algo de moralidad. Silent and white horror, exactly. I think that is something that is present in those films, and it's something about the loneliness that gives us away this fantasy world. Because I think that I think that there is something about our childhood that if we, for example, I had this image inside me that if I went alone into a forest and I was in the middle of the night alone in a forest, I will definitely see something supernatural. I mean, I will definitely see a fairy or a werewolf. There is something magical, and also about the isolation. Here in Argentina, we have El Monte. I think it's a place, I've been there, and there's a place of absolute silence that gives you a creeping feeling in your back. I mean, like, there is a phrase that Marlon Brandon says that is the crickets in the countryside gives you chills. And I think it's exactly that, the way that you feel so vulnerable in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of isolation, en medio de la nada. Es algo tremendo. Sí. A mí te digo, yo cuando estoy sola en un campo, en las afueras de la ciudad, me da mucho la apertura a lo sobrenatural, ¿no? Yo ahí veo que las leyendas claramente se crearon en ese lugar, ¿no? Y es algo que también me encanta a mí, el folclore, o sea, todo lo que sea sobrenatural. Y ver y sentir el origen de eso en esa soledad y esa inmensidad tan fuerte y tan cruel y tan presente y tan espiritual también, por un lado, de la apertura del hombre hacia ese dramatismo. Pero creo que el Nordic Horror, que no hemos alejado tanto de la naturaleza, que aterra cuando te... Claro, o sea, es algo que para mí hay algo ahí de que yo me imagino a las personas en las cavernas contándose historias en el medio de la soledad de la noche.
Come back, Brannon.
I tested this all this morning and it worked great. I don't know what's happening.
We're cursed. We are cursed.
Anyway, I was just saying most of these Nordic horror films are very quiet. I to your point, they are very silent movies. They're and
they almost don't have dialogues.
That's
just
right.
That. There are no dialogues.
In fact, the Innocence, which depicts a lot of complex telepathy and all this stuff, is all done with pure cinema. I mean, there's almost no talking. It's a beautiful piece of filmmaking. and the light, let the right one in, surely is the best of them all. I mean, what a masterpiece.
Yeah. I think it's the door that opened towards or this Nordic horror, because I haven't seen Nordic horror, I think, before. I mean, I saw Ingmar Bergman films and I saw it, but I don't know why I relate him to Hollywood. I don't know why, but there is something about him that is like very
he's a little more, he wouldn't consider himself, I don't know what yeah, they're adult they're adult dramas, but if you watch them, they're all horror films, and they all feel like the same kinds of movies that we're talking about. They're very quiet, they're very emotional. There is stuff in, I don't know if you've ever seen Cries and Whispers. There are scenes in that movie that are so shocking and violent and disturbing that they wouldn't be made by anybody today.
There are people that masters of horror, such as, for example, Cronenberg, are huge fans of like, for it's not the Seventh Seal. Well, there are fans of Ingmar Bergman, but
Hour of the Wolf is his most aggressive horror film.
Yeah, but there is one about this guy that is having like a sort of anxiety and existential crisis, that he walks up towards the ceiling and starts walking in the ceiling.
Yeah, that's Hour of the Wolf. Yeah,
that's the Hour of the Wolf.
Yeah.
Fuck, I'm crossed with a lot of films right now. Well, but
it's also, those are older films. You know, they're not, and they're a little more, I don't know, maybe they're more pretentious. They're not, you know, by the way, my introduction to Nordic horror was Lars von Trier.
Oh,
yeah.
And a television series called The Kingdom, which is not a movie, but is one of the great horror shows ever made. And his films are really disturbing horror films. In fact, his most recent horror film, a Nordic horror, well, my favorite one of his films is called Melancholia.
The one, so
and
beautiful. But
that
mine
is
the Antichrist.
As existential horror as you can get. And then his most recent one, which I can't even say I can recommend to most people because it's so disturbing, is The House That Jack Built.
Jack Built, yeah.
Which is just a slice of madness. I mean, I can't recommend it. It's too intense, but I do recommend it if you're.
Have you seen The Antichrist?
Have I seen Antichrist? Yes, of course. I mean, that's classic Nordic horror, even more so, you know, in the woods. The woods play a big role in Nordic horror, you know?
And I think that the Antichrist is a bit more darker than Melancholia. Although I first met Lars von Trier for the first time with Melancholia, and then I went backwards and said, oh, what is this? I need to see more about this director. And then I saw the Antichrist, and the Antichrist is such a dark road. I mean, it's a dark movie about the darkness of the human soul and even mental health, and the crossover between the fantasy and reality in the side of a dark mind. And it's so beautiful because even though it's so dark, it's presented in a way, a theatrical, artistic way, and it's so beautiful to watch. And even though what you're watching is somebody chopping off the dick of another person. I mean, you're okay.
Spoiler alert.
This is happening. Sorry. But I prefer that this spoiler has been done. If you're watching that film, you're gonna watch a real scene. I think it's a real scene that happened in real life, because I think it's so well done that I really believe that a dick was being crushed down with a rock.
Yeah, it is that movie is harrowing. It is not for the faint of heart.
No.
And to your earlier point, Nordic horror goes places that I think even French horror doesn't go. I think French horror, which I love, doesn't go as deep psychologically as Nordic horror.
Because there you said it. I think you just said the difference between both of them. Something is about the inside, and I think French horror is more about the outside being also transformed during the film. I think sometimes you don't need to be so explicit to generate something. I mean, something is more about body horror maybe, but it also touches the inside of the soul. But sometimes these movies, for example, the right one in, doesn't have even, I think just in the end, you see a violent scene, but the whole movie is tension, and it's about a dramatic way of watching life and isolation and loneliness, and the way a little boy is absolutely lonely, and he finds something to grab himself. I mean, he suffers bullying. He suffers something that not even his parents are even aware of. But he finds something that is this little girl that is a sort of pillar to sustain him, even though she is something really dark. And what I really love about it is the final decision that every partner of that little girl has to make. The decision to say goodbye to the human world and let go of society and partner with the supernatural. I mean, I would always decide towards the supernatural and let go of humanity, but it's something, I think it's, no, but it's true. When I saw with a friend of mine, we watched a film, well, you obviously know, but it's Close Encounter of the Third Type of Spielberg. Close Encounters of the Third Type of Spielberg. And in the ending, it's something really funny that we laugh out loud, but it's something really deep that he touches there. In the end, the main character lets go of all of humanity just to join outer space. I mean, this is a metaphor.
Yeah.
The way that he lets go, he has a family, he has children, and he says, goodbye, I'm going with the aliens. And
it's an interesting, it's Close Encounters is my favorite Spielberg movie, because I think it's his most personal film. And it's not that very long section with the family. You don't get the sense that he's connected with his family in the first place.
Exactly.
And that it's a troubled marriage. And he's not finding the connection to what he needs in an earthly way. And you're right, it's the only ending the movie could have.
And that is something that is really interesting, because maybe the happy ending is with the family and we're all very happy, but that's not the truth. That is not real life. and sometimes we decide to let go. And I think that these films that are we mentioned earlier in the Nordic horror portray that about some characters that don't have even the contact with their own family, and they don't feel part of their family. They are like aliens in their own family, and that is something that happens. And maybe it's such a taboo subject, that because maybe we see this with adolescents, like when we watch movies about a dysfunctional family, it's always the adolescent kid that goes away and runs away, and I'm going to tell you. But what about a 7-year-old boy that doesn't feel part of his or her family? I mean, there is something that there is deeper, because it's not about the conflict of adolescence. It's about something that started from the very beginning. And that is something really, it's really
breathtaking.
deep,
Yeah.
¿cómo se dice? Fuerte, es un tema fuerte.
Yeah.
You know,
The deep.
I think about the long winters that they have, and the long summers, but I think about those long winters and what effect that has on the filmmakers' psychologies. And the only way I can say it is that a lot of these Nordic films are about hibernating emotions, and that are going to come out, because like a bear hibernating in a long winter, you know, there's something so chilly about these films. As you said, quiet, remote, and nature always plays a big role. And these characters who are kind of living with very repressed emotions, and whether it's depression and melancholia. It sounds like Hatching is a very tightly wound, repressive movie dealing with.
Yes.
Just from the trailer. You know, these movies are incomparable to any other horror films. They're very unique. I mean, Nordic horror is a genre. There's a book coming out about Nordic horror that I tried to get so I could sound like I knew what I was talking about. But it's not coming out until Halloween. I'll try to find it for you. It's a small publisher, but it's the first book I've seen, a serious book about the history of Nordic horror, going back to Carl Dreyer in the silent era, and all the way to today. And really in the 2000s was when Nordic horror has become its own thing, really as a subgenre. And if I see a Nordic horror movie come out, there's been a rash of them lately. Lamb is another one. I'm first in line.
Yeah, something I think I agree. When you get a taste of this sort of cinema, that you know what you're gonna get, because I think that they have something about fantasy. They have something about they link a lot horror with fantasy. I haven't seen horror films of Nordic horror films that are that do not include fantasy in them. I don't know if you know any of them, but most of what I've watched all include dark fantasy. I mean, you say horror, I say horror with dark fantasy. And that is something that I love. So I would definitely watch any Nordic horror film that comes up, and like stalk the deep web to watch films that are not even mentioned here. But I want to watch, because it's a ride. And I think it's very beautiful how they show dark things of humanity. And there is also something that I wanted to say, just to mention, because this is true. They have long winters, and you know that the sun is very important for the human psyche. I mean, for the biology of our organism. And depression, it's commonly caused by lack of sun in these places. And it's a common subject in every single one of the films. I mean, not the fact that they don't have sun the most part of the year, so they don't have sun and that causes depression. But I think that very in touch with this deep sadness or detachment of society, the fact that they are all so isolated with the school.
Well, think about it. For half the year, you're inside your home, and it's dark, and there's probably a lot of drinking going on. You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
it is. It's not surprising that there are so many stories of isolation and depression. I mean, Lars von Trier's movies are almost all about his depression. He's the first to tell you that he, you know, Melancholia being the most overt one of those. Yeah. I think it's also worth mentioning that these films have a very dark sense of humor. They may seem like they have no humor in them, but very, very dry, dark humor. I mentioned the house.
You see that a little bit more explicit. In the other ones, I don't know what you're speaking about. If you haven't seen Hatching, because I didn't sense any sort of humor in the other ones. I think. Which one can you mention about the humor?
Well, I think that again, this is a very controversial film, but The House That Jack Built to me is kind of a comedy. I mean, it's
well, in that case,
I think there are lots of comedic threads running through that. I think that but you're right. They're mostly humorless. I think the Nordic thrillers, the Nordic crime thrillers probably have more of the humor. The dark
I like
humor.
Also the Nordic crime thrillers.
That's a whole other subject.
Yeah, but they also have fantasy in them. Yeah, they also have a little bit of dark fantasy realism. Maybe dreams or everything, but they have to just make a little bit of touch of a moment there. I think that all of what I've seen has a little bit of dark fantasy in them. But I wanted to say something that I saw a comment about this, and I was going to say it as well. But there's also something in the music that they do that is also attached with this. And for example, not even in classical music, because there I can see it a lot. When I studied music here in the university, they said, yeah, the Nordics did the best music because they were all depressed because they don't have sun, and we don't do music because classical music because we have a lot of sun here and we're not depressed. And I was like, okay, that was when we didn't have the inflation that we have now, but okay. But the thing is that they have also this music that also speaks about fantasy. I mean, I'm a huge fan of metal, of dark metal and symphonic metal. There are all these bands Within Temptation, Nightwish, and they all speak about folklore tales and these magical beings, the names that are sometimes the names of the songs of angels and of fairies or Claymore or Amaranth. And I think it's very present there. I don't know if maybe it's because they have so much isolation that they can sense. I spoke a little bit earlier when you were disconnected about the fact that when you are alone and isolated by society. Sorry, that was a. But here we have something that is not similar to what they have, but we have El Monte. Here we say that it's a place that is very far from society and very isolated in the middle of nowhere. And we say El Monte, where there is no silence and where I believe that all the folklore and the dark fantasy stories in Argentina came from these places, where you're alone, where there's a lot of silence, and where you sense that the darkness is looking back at you. And that is something that is very interesting because you feel that creeping sensation that there is something looking back at you and you cannot see it. And that is something that I think that is very present in this Nordic films. I know it touches something about the fiber of our own mind and how it works with this isolation, with this sort of loneliness, but being so far away from people. I mean, we are alone, and our mind starts functioning in a different way.
Well, you look at, again, I go back to Bergman. You know, he shot a lot of his films on this one island. I don't remember the name. I think it's called Bergman Island at this point. But
yes, it's called Bergman.
But you look at, it's like, what else is there to do on that island except stare into the abyss? It's an island. You're completely isolated, and in winter you're suffocated by the cold. And so that, again, there is I think you're describing the existential component to it, almost cosmic horror. It's
yes.
The abyss.
You when you make the comparison with the French horror, it's about reality. We are always dealing with murderers, with home invasion, and the difference is here we are dealing with the dark part of the soul. The dark part of human nature. In the case of the Innocent, it reminds me a lot to Lord of the Flies. The dark, and also the idea that children in this film, they are living in kind of in their own reality, separated from the adult realm. Actually, that's when I thought, when I watched the film, I thought in Stephen King films, and then Stephen King says that he loved The Innocents because this idea of children living in their own world, a world that cannot be accessed by other adults.
And a world where magic is real. They don't know that a lot of things aren't real. So when the young girl first sees the supernatural power, the fantastical powers, she doesn't question it like an adult would, because it's part of the fabric of their reality. Yeah, you're right.
And that is, for me, the main difference between the French horror or this horror. I think that there is magic in these films, and there is magic that is accepted with no doubt. I mean, there is not a moment in the films where you question that this is really happening. I mean, and the characters do not react as something out of this world, that there is something that may happen. Like in hatching, it's totally normal for a little girl to find an egg and the egg has a monster inside it. I mean, any kid in a normal situation would panic and would tell his parents that there's a monster in her room. But this is like something, okay, I have a little monster. Oh, he's eating another person. Oh, okay. This is very common. And that is something that I think I really enjoy. I enjoy this magic that these films have. And not going so far away, but I think Lord of the Rings has a lot of Nordic folklore in it. The stories that Tolkien expresses in his Lord of the Rings are all taken about the elves or the dragons, or all this mythology. I think is from the Nordic horror folklore, and maybe that's why I'm a huge fan. I think that is true. But
what did you so speaking of, I mean, I thought that the Norseman was essentially a horror film. I mean, it was a serial killer. I mean, it was bloody and violent. It was an American director, but was filmed in Iceland and dealt with Nordic legends and Nordic mythology. And what did you think of that movie? Do you think that falls into this category?
no, I think it was Shakespeare made in the Nordic lands.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. It was
Shakespeare made in the Nordic lands. I'm sorry, but I think it's a great movie, but it's sort of like Hamlet or Macbeth.
It's Hamlet, yeah.
Brought up into this world that I really enjoyed the film. I like the Northman, and I think it really portrays by my eyes, I can watch all this Nordic style, but the story, the story behind this is a Shakespearean story. I've seen it before, but I really enjoyed it. I will enjoy always the sort of films that, even though it's a story that I have already read about or watched about, it's told by this sort of style that I really enjoyed. And Eggers is a very, very beautiful director, and I really enjoy his films.
Was there, now I wanted to ask you too, there's a movie called The Border.
Yeah.
Was that a Nordic movie?
Yes,
it's
Okay,
from
so that one is very hard to put in a category.
Dark fantasy.
Well,
It's dark fantasy, right?
Yeah.
It's also a crime movie.
Well,
it's
What's
my
about it?
favorite film. It's a beautiful story. It's a story about alienation, because the main character feels that lives out. Well, she feels lonely because she's ugly, but she doesn't understand she belongs to other world. When the other character tells you, no, the problem is you're living in a human world and you don't belong to it. And that's when we have everything. We have the alienation, this character that is alienated. We have the dark fantasy because we're dealing with trolls. That's a creature of mythology. And well, it has the most disturbing and beautiful sex scene of all time, I think. No, but really, I mean,
I'm not agree with him, but I think that Border, I really enjoyed the film. I think it's a dark fantasy, and as we said before, I think even in the thrillers that we watch and the crime thrillers that we watch from the north, they also have this condiment of fantasy in them. I think the fantasy, it's really something that maybe I haven't. Have you seen Equinox?
oh,
What's it called?
There is Equinox. It's
Equinox?
Equinox. Yeah. It's,
No, I haven't seen Equinox. Let me write that down. What is Equinox?
well, it's the same thing here as I may say. What is Equinox? Is it a thriller or a dark fantasy, or a thriller with crimes and a dark fantasy? It's something that happened between two timelines that cross each other, of an incident that happened to the main lead when she was young, and she starts to get visions of this that happens in her past that never really she hasn't really get over with this story that happened with her sister and something like that, and she goes back to find answers of what really did happen. But there is also this crossing over what is real, what is not. Is that when you're watching it, you think you're watching maybe a crime thriller, but suddenly it transforms into something really fantastic. I mean, it's a dark fantasy, and that really has a great sex scene. Speaking about sex scenes and strange things, like a god and a girl having sex in this scene, like a monster and a girl. That is something that I think it's very beautiful. And that is when I was canceled. No.
You're okay. I think you're okay.
no,
Film, by the way, the reason you're bringing up these sex scenes is because, I mean, you have to see them. They're indescribable. That's what's so great about some of these Nordic horror films, is they're indescribable.
They have good sex scenes. I think that I really enjoy them.
Yeah, it's actually what really love about Border is it's a story of self-acceptance. It's a story of finding, your true, where you belong in a way, right? Of course, I mean, and the actress Eva, who plays this character, he plays so well. I mean, of course, he has all the makeup. Actually, Eva, we're going to talk with Eva next week because because no, she's amazing. I mean, one of the things I love the most is the performance, because you can really see the expressions, you know, when she's acting like an animal, and then the sadness. Well, I mean,
After I saw
it's
the
my
movie,
favorite.
after I saw the movie, I had to go online and find out what the actress looked like. Who was this person? And of course, she's very beautiful. But well, yeah, that's one of the, if someone's watching this and you haven't seen this film, Border, again, I wouldn't even know how to describe it. You just have to see it.
Yes, totally. And the thing about, well, you talk about the Northman, and when I watched the Northman, of course, I thought I was watching a Greek tragedy. And also, the difference here, I felt that the Eggers I remember having that I told you once that Robert Eggers is like someone who studies history and wants to show you and wants to that the audience he wants to transport the audience to that specific time, but I remember a scene where you see a magical fight against, you know, this corpse that that is alive, but then you see it's his imagination. So Eggers is telling you, you see, this is real. What's happening is this is how these characters see the world. They believe so much in this that for this character, all this is happening. So it's like, shutting down the magic, just showing you, a documentary about, these beliefs this character had in that period of time. That's the difference. In Nordic horror, we know the magic is real. We accept that from the beginning. We don't question that. And that's the thing. I mean, I love Eggers. He's so passionate about history because he wants to reproduce every single detail, and I love that. But I feel that's the difference.
I think
In one,
if you compare, maybe The Witch is more of a Nordic horror than the Northman itself. I mean, how it's displaced, The Witch has a lot more in common with the Nordic horror than the Northman itself.
Good point.
Yeah, because it deals with folk. I mean, the idea of all these rituals, this, paganism,
I think that there is something about isolation, the immense of nature that surrounds you, that makes you in a way claustrophobic, of this sort of immense ocean of nothingness, and you're so far away that if you scream, no one will hear. And that is something interesting. What happens if you scream there? No one will come. So all the monsters over there exist. And the main lead are also little boys and little girls that are imagining things. But there is a moment where you say, wait, are they imagining this, or is this really happening? And that there is a moment there that you cross between the worlds of imagination and of reality. And that is why I believe that maybe if you want to say that Eggers made something that is more Nordic horror, I think The Witch is more of a Nordic horror than the Northman itself.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, good point. All good points. Yeah, it was interesting when I was developing a horror TV show called Salem that took place in the 1700s in early America. I had to make a decision to just say, well, most people believed that magic was real. And so I have to depict events, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. I had to put myself there and not be condescending, not to never for one moment say that none of this is real. I mean, it was a commitment to the supernatural. And I think, and I think you're right about the Nordic horror. I'm thinking about what you're saying. It almost always has a supernatural element. Even the crime thrillers have some weird fate going on. The way the stories are plotted are almost heightened to a point of supernatural. You know, you're right about all of that. I hadn't thought about it that way.
I've seen that pattern. I don't know the word in English, but I say it in Spanish. It's realismo mágico, like
magical, magical realism. You know,
is that what you say? But
yeah.
It's something that it's like a sort of sometimes it's a little bit of salt in the food, and you have a little bit of sense of this. It's a little bit salty. It has a little bit of spice on it, of fantasy spice. Maybe it's not all about fantasy, it's about everything else, but there are these moments, or maybe it's the mood or the atmosphere that is generated with the music and the photography. There is something there that is taking me away to another world. Always there is a pull towards the other world.
Yeah, you should be writing books on film criticism, film theory, and
no, I write really bad. I do not write good. I mean, I'm a really bad writer, and I think writing is the most difficult thing in the world, and I admire writers because it's such a responsibility and a job to do a good job about writing. So I admire them. I love to read them. I am not a writer.
Now, what about, I know we're talking about movies, but how about Nordic horror novels?
I love them.
So can you recommend a really scary, good, classic example of a Nordic horror novel that I can read?
Nordic horror?
Well, the author of Let the Right One In, all his books are about, dark fantasy. Actually, Border is based on a short story, and a great short story, Let the Right One In also. And there's another novels I have. All of his books are amazing. And also, I don't remember the names because they are so complicated. But I will send you the list if you want them.
Okay, please. Thank you. I really haven't read any.
Oh, yeah. Again, they deal with this darkness, this isolation. Well, you mentioned that there's a problem of alcoholism there. We had a live with a director there, the director of Idioman, Christian, who made a movie about a guy who loves horror, who has a small video store in the 90s, and now he's all the time living off the nostalgia of having had that video store, and it talks about that, because in the video store everyone gathered to talk about horror films, and now the video store is gone because we have online films, so everyone is alone again. And he told me that that's a very common problem of loneliness. Actually, the main character drinks a lot, and it's funny because it's made by a horror fan, and it's about a horror fan, dealing with this isolation problem. And it's called Video Man. It's a very nice movie.
I saw that movie. It's really good, but I think that there's something. I read a lot of philosophy, and there is something that I think that the beginning of existentialism started in the North. I mean, there is something there about the loneliness and about the detachment of the own self. I'm forgetting everything I've studied when I studied philosophy, but I think Kierkegaard is one of the first existential philosophers. And I don't remember from where Kierkegaard is, but I think he is from... somebody Google it.
Kierkegaard. Tell us. It sounds like a Nordic name.
Kierkegaard. He's the first existential philosopher of the story of philosophy. I mean, if you study history of philosophy, Kierkegaard came before all the other philosophers from France, for example, like Sartre and Camus. And Kierkegaard has something of it's something really weird, because even though he believes in God, he feels forsaken by him. I mean, there's some sense of being forsaken by the own God and being alone that takes you to this existential philosophy about life, about the
You've
way
just you
thrown in
just
the world.
described almost every Ingmar Bergman movie. I mean, he even made a trilogy. Some call it the Atheist trilogy. It's about, and it's stories about people who felt abandoned by God. The running theme is films. You just described.
The thing is that existentialism is essentially that, is the moment where the human being feels forsaken by God. And Sartre, for example, says that we are thrown into the world. We are thrown into the world, and we have to survive as a society, but also as an individual. And the way to survive is really the individualism, in a way. Like the sort of ethics that we make is sort of, it starts within the self. And Kierkegaard, I don't know, please someone Google from where Kierkegaard is.
Denmark.
Yes,
Denmark.
so existentialism started in the fucking north. Sorry.
That's great.
But it's true, it started there. I think
makes
that
sense.
everything.
Yeah.
You should read Kierkegaard, by the way. He's a very good philosopher, and I really enjoy how he writes. And I feel very deeply forsaken after reading his books. And I feel he felt forsaken. And even though he believes in God, he is forsaken by him. And that is something really devastating.
Yeah, and one of my favorite Bergman movies is called The Silence, and that's refer.
We after. Oh,
Wait, hold on. I got to plug my phone in.
we should after all these lives we should make this a list of books and films to watch for the audience.
Definitely. Can you guys still see me?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
But we still have curse.
I mean, I remember Kierkegaard, and yes, again, he's a very pessimistic philosopher in many ways.
God. That is the strangest thing about Kierkegaard.
That's the
different
thing.
from
But
the existentialism from France. It started with Kierkegaard, that question about humanity, and then Heidegger also develops more about this. But the way it started with this question that about being forsaken by God and about being in this life alone. And really the existentialism philosophy is really lonely. It's a lonely philosophy. It really, even the Sartre says that the hell is present in the eyes of the others. Hell is the eyes of the others. I mean, heaven and hell, it's all here. And I think that this is something that we can see in these films. And they are very philosophical, these films. I really enjoyed of Ingmar Bergman, The Seventh Seal, when the character, I would love to play chess with death. I mean, I maybe I could be friends, because I'm so scared of death that maybe if I play chess and maybe do an arrangement that he doesn't take me away until I'm 200 years old and in good health, maybe we can be friends. But I am not friends with death. And The Seventh Seal, when the main lead just speaks with death and he refuses to go, and it's like a moment there that really gets to me. And I'm so scared of death. Why do we have to die?
Yeah, and the whole movie takes place during the Black Death.
Yeah.
And Max von Sydow. Yep.
No, I mean, and other thing about existentialism starts with, yes, of course, the feeling of being forsaken, and what the French does after Kierkegaard is to say we have to find a meaning, because life, we're going to die, There's no way of stopping that. So why we are here? What's the purpose? And well, that's the answer of of Camus. I know if you read L'étranger, the foreign of Camus, the Plague. One of the best books ever written about existentialism, The Plague of Camus.
Yeah,
it's about what we do every day. Well, The Plague, not only is beautifully written, for me, it's the first zombie book because it's not about zombies, of course. It's about what we do when we know it's over, when we know tomorrow maybe we'll die. Everyone is dying around you. I mean, just that. I mean, and the answer, I think, Camus.
That is not in the Foreigner. That is in the Pest.
The Plague. The Pest. Yeah.
Okay, la peste. Okay.
And the Plague, it's about that. It's about, okay, the purpose is in everyday action. The main character of the Plague, it's a doctor who say, I'm going to save at least, I'm going to try to save everyone I can, even if they die. I'm going to try to to find joy every day. And is going to keep me alive. The actions that I took, the decisions and action I'm doing every day. That's would be the answer to the melancholy of existentialism.
Wait, there are some questions here that we should answer. One of the Argentinian tricky. Did your knowledge of horror influence your writing of some Star Trek scripts? I'm thinking about Scorpion episodes. That is the question.
Yes, the Borg Scorpions, of Voyager.
Yeah. Oh, without question. I was always I'm a science fiction fan, but a horror fan first. And the two do crossover, but yeah, a lot of my Star Trek episodes had horror elements in them. Some more obvious than others, but absolutely.
Well, what you're saying is really interesting. And now, after you said that, I am going to ask you the very special question that I have in mind. What do you think Alien is? The 1979 film of Ridley Scott. Is it a horror film? Is it a sci-fi film? What is it?
Well, I think at its core, it's a haunted house movie. I mean, it's a monster movie. But the science fiction in it was very radical at the time. It's very the ship is broken down. It's dirty. Most science fiction was very clean. It just felt lived in. It felt real. There was a realism to it. The Alien had a naturalism to it that felt believable. It didn't feel like a man in a suit. It was going through a metamorphosis. So I think it was actually a really important, hugely influential piece of science fiction. Of course, H.R. Giger, the German illustrator, had a lot to do with that, but so did Ridley Scott. So I would say it's science fiction horror, but I think if you had to call it one or the other, I mean, there's no question it's a horror movie. I mean, it's scary as hell. I mean, it's
and what you're saying is really important. Before the movie, Giger existed, and Giger is a monster creator. And even though he's a sci-fi horror sort of illustrator, because he crosses over the machine, the body, and the monsters in a crossover with machines and human bodies, that was before. I mean, Alien existed because Giger existed. If not, we wouldn't have Alien here. And because even the pitching of Alien was done after. I mean, the movie was accepted because first when O'Bannon wrote the script, nobody wanted the script because they thought, what, an alien that is going to impregnate you, like it rapes you, and they thought that it was like a sort of blob that came in and violated you and raped you and you became pregnant. But then he got the Giger illustration and he said, look, this is the alien. And people were, that's the alien. Okay. Okay. So you're not going to make a Class B movie, because at first it was going to be a Class B movie like Dark Star was. And what you're saying is really interesting, because some people believe that sci-fi cannot be horror because it's sci-fi. And I heard people say that Alien is a horror movie. Alien is a sci-fi film. And I'm not, no, Alien is a horror film. I mean, why do you need to separate the fact that it's a sci-fi?
I think that genres can cross-pollinate.
Yeah.
And they do all the time. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that it's a great piece of science fiction and it's a great horror movie.
Yeah.
And it's a great action movie. I mean, say whatever you want. I mean, it's just a great movie. And Giger was everything. You could never describe Giger's work. You have to see it.
Yes.
That's how great it is.
Giger work is about, this combination between flesh and, machine and sexuality, because in a way, the idea of the alien impregnate, it's all a sexual metaphor. Of course. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
This is my little baby, and I just wanted to share it to you. It's one of the beautiful things that lives in my house after my child. I mean, first my daughter, and then it's this book.
So I met with H.R. Giger.
What?
Really? When he was still alive, we were doing a Star Trek Borg movie, and we wanted him to redesign the Borg for us, because the Borg have a Giger aspect to them. But I had dinner with him here in Hollywood. Very nice man, but he was very expensive. We couldn't afford him. But he came very close to doing that for us. I wish the studio had been more generous with the budget.
For first contact, you mean?
This is such a huge anecdote.
Wow.
I cannot believe I just heard this anecdote. I'm so happy right now. I can't believe that this happened. I can't believe that the studio didn't invest in Giger. And I would have loved to see you work with Giger. I think this is blowing my mind out. Like, there is such a huge amount of imagination right now inside of me. And imagining you working with Giger and what would come out of... No, I need to go back in time and make it happen. Fuck.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was... I wish I'd had him sign one of... I have a Giger book around here somewhere, but very nice, unassuming man. You would never look at him and think these things were coming out of his mind,
But that is something that happens. I mean, that is something that is really common for people that do monsters or horror genre. Suddenly you see that this devastating horror films, and afterwards I'm like, what do you want? Do you want a cup of tea? Come inside my house. I have so many cats. Do you want to see my cats? And there's a family with like 8 kids and everything. They're all happy. And suddenly you see the monster that they create, and they're like, okay, there's something. I'm such a huge fan of manga. Have you read manga?
Of course.
And one of my top one illustrators is Berserk. Have you seen Berserk?
Berserk, you mean?
It's called Murai, Kento Murai. And the guy has such a dark stories. Berserk is one of my top manga, and I think it's one of the top mangas of all time. I'm not saying as an exaggeration. I may exaggerate things, but this is not the case. Berserk, I'm going to write it down, Berserk.
I've seen his work.
Kento Murai.
I don't think I've ever read, I haven't read that one, Berserk. Okay. I'm going to get right away.
Yeah, and if you like, I mean, he's a cosmic horror fan. I mean, and the funny thing is that you see him in the pics. Well, he died last year, and it was devastating for the fandom. Like, we really had a mourning season because he didn't finish Berserk, even though he told his best friend to keep on the legacy if something were to happen to him. And he had this supporting back holding for the story that we have been following Berserk since the 80s. It's a manga that has 40 years.
Wow.
No, it's amazing. And the thing is that it's very funny because you see this amount of monsters and all this gore and all this death and all this darkness and rape and murder. And suddenly you see a picture of Kento Miura and he's like,
Yeah.
and he's like such a cute guy. And you say, this guy is like, I know, he will send me to his house and we'll all be pink with happy families and cats everywhere. And he just writes such creepy, dark, fucking amazing.
Another author I really admire, well, Clive Barker, you know him. I'm sure he's a great guy. He's so, again.
Clive Barker is an eloquent, handsome man. Like you would never assume, but
yeah.
Now guys, my phone is about to die, so we're gonna have to again. I feel like I've learned a great deal, and I've written down a whole bunch of things I need to read and see.
Yes, I love recommendations.
But
well,
I love doing this, guys, and this was a great topic.
The thing is that I don't have a social life, so I love recommending what I do without my social life. I read manga, I watch movies, and I read books, and that is all my social life right now. I don't have any friends.
There is nothing wrong with that.
I think it was a great idea to talk about this because you said last time we should talk about horror in different countries, in different culture, because for me it's amazing to discover, I mean, new culture, new authors. I mean, because of course everyone is watching mainstream now, but suddenly you have this author from Germany, Korea. Well, now we have the Latin America. So yeah, we should choose like a region and talk about that.
I would love to do that. I would love it, and maybe get more people watching these movies. You know, I'm lucky. I live in Los Angeles, where they show these films. You know, I get to see them in the theater, but most people don't.
No, I watch it all in the deep web. Here, nothing comes here. I mean, nothing comes here. Argentina is sort of a dark, deep hole where nothing comes in. Cinemas, and I have such a big depression about it because I need to get like I'm still like in the deep web and like people are you watching porn? Yes, I'm watching porn. Like, no, this is all searching my dark horror films around the world and things that don't come here and I need to consume because I'm such a junkie of good stories, horror stories.
You have this right?
What?
No, yeah.
You have Netflix and
yeah, well, we have, but the problem is all the things, the menu of Netflix here it's so limited, and it's just a few things and mostly local bad things. But please come next year to Argentina so we can organize some events and talks with people here. I mean,
I would love that.
Wait, I want something from you. I want you to read Berserk and tell me what you feel about this manga because it's epic. Epic.
Okay. Should I start from the beginning?
Yes, why not?
Okay.
Because it's the same story. I mean, it's 40 years old, but I think it's one of the most complex stories and such an amazing story that honestly, there are moments where you cannot believe how you got from one place to another. And there's a twist in the story that, There's a moment where something cuts the story in half, and you're, what the fuck has just happened? I mean, I thought I was reading this manga, and suddenly it came around to another, what the fuck has just happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is
Don't
something
give,
I love, the what the fuck. So, surprise me.
okay.
Well, let's do like this. Let's propose a topic, a subject, a region, and let's start doing the research. Maybe we can, I don't know.
You decide and tell me. I think, yeah. Let's. I don't know if. Yeah, pick something. You know, like a Middle East. Let's pick like Middle East. Like let's pick.
Really? Okay.
There have been a couple of Iranian films that have come out that were really interesting. Let's pick some. You know, it may not be a region where there are a lot of horror films, but there'll be some.
Yeah.
You know.
No, actually,
I'll leave that up to you.
Excellent. We will do it.
But
well, thank you, Brannon, for
much great horror out there.
Yeah.
And I try to see all the horror movies from all the countries that come out that are available to me anyway. What I haven't done is read a lot of books from other countries. And I need to do more.
Yeah. The problem also is the translation in those cases, because I know there's a lot. In Spanish we have that problem. I'm sure in Middle East. Well, I tried to get some of the book from Middle East, but they haven't been translated. That's a problem. Oh, yeah. Oh, but by the way, have you seen Nocturna finally?
No, Nocturna. Where can I have still not watched Nocturna, so that's first on my.
Now it's available on Amazon for the US.
Great. I will have watched that and read Berserk or some of Berserk the next time we speak.
You will not let it go. I can tell you that it's a one-way road to redemption of the human soul. And I'm not exaggerating.
Okay.
Well, guys, thank you.
Pero chao, me voy. Chao, basta. Me pasé de quicio.
Thank you, Brannon, and well, see you next time, guys.
Yeah, let me know when you want to do this again.
After you read Berserk.